pre-mix of commercial and residential uses. So this is the description of the district. The HVBOD performance standards, at a minimum, the applicant must provide open space, including a walkway that is accessible to the public and that connects to a public right-of-way to a harbor-wide walkway should such a walkway be built. The applicant must also provide a view corridor easement that aligns with the southern edge of the Elm Street, allowing visual access across the parcel to Cohasset Harbor from the public right-of-way. In addition to the required performance standards in this 300-22-6, the Cohasset Planning Board may adopt regulations establishing additional guidelines, design guidelines for development in the HVBOD. In granting a special permit, the Cohasset Planning Board may impose conditions on building and site design to ensure the architectural compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood and to ensure consistency with the approved design guidelines. There are parking requirements within the HVBOD, and they shall be consistent with the requirements of 300-7.1, with the following exception: dual use and 1.5 per household. Some design elements of note include a building shall have no minimum front yard setback in order to encourage the continuation of the existing street wall. However, buildings with more than 2 stories shall be required to step the upper story back by a minimum of 10 feet from the public right-of-way. A building on the waterfront shall have a minimum setback of 25 feet from the shoreline. Maximum height is 35 feet. Maximum height of building is 35 feet above base flood elevation. Maximum structural coverage is limited to 80%. The minimum setback for a side yard shall be 10 feet from any adjacent residential building. That's the basis of our regulation. Tonight, what we will be doing is we will be reviewing information, hearing from the applicant, answering questions, listening to peer reviews, hearing from the planning board, as well as who are elected officials, as well as members of the public. Lauren, could you please explain to the members of the public who might be listening how they can communicate with us during this hearing?
Certainly, thank you. For those members of the public who might want to submit comments or speak to the board, we would ask that you use the Q&A function that you'll find at the bottom of the screen. If you could input first your name and address, please, before, and if you want to insert your question, you can type it, or you can just alert us and we can promote you when the time is appropriate for public comment. Thank you.
Let me also note that if you are listening and for some reason your internet fails, you can also call in to access, is it Jen or Lauren who would be receiving the phone calls?
Actually, there is a phone number that would direct them straight into the meeting. We would not be receiving the phone calls. They would access the meeting via phone call. They could hear everything that was happening there. They certainly would likely not be able to see. But that would be the way to access. Thank you.
All right. The reason I raised that is in a couple of meetings that I've been in recently, that was the only way the public could get in. All right. So let's begin by identifying who is here. So give me just a chance to look at the population of individuals who are present at the meeting. So 3, 6, 9, 12. So we have 14 people identified, and there's a total of 22 participants in the meeting. And that means that there are people that are not identified. So I am not going to either see you or be able to call on you, but I just want everyone to know how many people are here. As I said, this evening, we will be reviewing information. We'll be hearing from the applicant, answering questions. We will be listening to our peer reviewers. The planning board members themselves, who are elected officials, will also be engaged in discussion. Members of the public, Lauren, again, when somebody wants to actually make a comment, do they do it in the Q&A, you read it, and then they get a response, or is there no response?
I would ask that members of the public input their comments into question and answer, and then at the time that we take public comments, we would address them all chronologically as they came in, as we have done at past meetings.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks for verifying that. All right, speakers present. And I will do this in the order of sort of how we have been working together across.
You want to take a roll call of the planning board members?
Oh, thank you, Clark. And indeed, let's go ahead and do that. May I ask that Clark Brewer, will all planning board members please identify yourself first by stating your name and then raising your hand. Clark Brewer.
Clark Brewer here.
Paul Grady.
Paul Grady here.
Eric Potter.
Eric Potter here.
Tom Callahan.
Here. I'm Joanne here.
Paul Caleri.
Paul Caleri here.
In addition, Laura Lind and Jennifer Orem, who are our town staff support, are here. And Eve Tapper, who is the principal of Planner in a Pinch, is an assisting planner on this project. Lauren, is Karis going to be at this meeting?
Karis will be joining us. She is coming straight from an executive session with a different community that she represents, but she will be joining us a bit late. She will be here though.
All right, great. Thanks very much. So in order, so what we have typically done is we've heard first from the applicant, and we have two applicants here tonight, Mr. George McGoldrick and Mr. Theodore Lubick, and they will be first. We will then listen or speak to or ask if they have other representatives who would like to speak. From there, and that could be Mr. Adam Brodsky. It also could be John Cavernaro. They may just be here to answer questions. From there, we will move to the planning board members who will make comments, ask questions. At that point, we will, I will stop. I will ask for clarification. I will assess the extent to which questions that needed answers were going to be answered or somehow remedied. And then after that, we will go to public comments. That will allow us to essentially go the full sweep of the audience in the room. After that, we will return to the applicant and ask the question of, based on what was heard or what is known, that there are any additional items of information that would be presented to the town, and if so, when. And then we return to the planning board members and ask whether they themselves have information that they wish to see. And at that point, we will take a temperature check to see where we're at in terms of what our options are going forward. Our options are going forward that we come to some understanding and we decide the information is sufficient with no new information required, and we could close the hearing. We can continue the hearing. If we continue the hearing, we need to identify a date in the month of December. Whether it is the first date that we have in December or the second date will obviously depend on the amount of information that might be needed. Now, before I say anything, before we begin again, I feel that I need to say just a little bit more about this project. For those people who are not, have not been sitting in on the discussions, they may just want to know a little history. So this is as short as I can get it, and I'm sure there'll be items I missed. We've been underway for more than a year. The project includes several buildings. There will be demolitions of 2 structures. Parking will be provided. There will be residences and there will be commercial. This planning board has seen 2 project designs. The first was a multi-unit residential and commercial project with underground parking. The second is a project with surface level parking, a reduced number of residents, and a reduction of the commercial activity ratio on site. The team of planners, the planning board members, have been presented with 2 sets of site plans and rescaled residential designs. And last meeting, we ended with a request for more detail on a variety of items. At our last meeting, we were in dialogue about parking, the commercial component of the project, the landscaping, accessing, and the use of public space, the discussion and management and ownership of the public space, and the height of the building. We additionally received over the last 2 weeks a number of documents which will be on the public website. And these include information distillations by the town legal counsel, by our 2 planning staff, and a small amount of information that has come in from residents and some extraneous information that's about details. So that's where we stand. So with no further ado, and I apologize for the lengthy introduction, but I just thought since not been around for a while. So I'd like to now call on Mr. George McGoldrick and Mr. Theodore Lubick.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Planning Board. We're excited to be here tonight, obviously. We met about 5 weeks ago, and at that point in time, we presented the project based on all the information that both the Planning Board had asked for, as well as all the peer review. So we're looking forward to tonight's discussion, and I think Adam Brodsky will just give a quick little discussion about where we think we are and how we can all jointly move forward. Adam?
Thank you, George. Madam Chair, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. My name is Adam Brodsky. I'm a land use and environmental attorney with Drowan, Taccio, and Morgan, and I represent the applicant Chai Elm Street LLC. You know Ted Lubitz and George McGoldrick, who are the managers, and we're joined this evening from with John Cavanaro from Cavanaro Consulting. So our last public hearing was on October 14th, and at the conclusion of that public hearing, Ms. Lynn proposed working with Ms. Tapper and with you, Ms. Glassmeyer, to begin drafting a decision and propose conditions for the project. You agreed with that and also wanted a checklist of outstanding issues. Mr. Brewer indicated that he also was looking for a draft decision with conditions, with the goal to close the public hearing this evening. Mr. Callahan indicated that he would like the board to draft the decision rather than the staff, but everyone appeared to be in agreement that we would have draft conditions to review for this evening. For our part, we provided written responses to what we understand to be the outstanding issues, which could be used to draft those conditions. And as you mentioned, Ms. Lynn circulated additional information yesterday, which included a technical review matrix, an example of conditions that were used for the project at 132 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, letter from Town Council with proposed findings, and also a factual summary of the hearings. But unfortunately, we did not see a proposed decision or conditions from the board. So prior to the last hearing, Ted and George gave me one task, which was to get the public hearing closed and the project approved. I obviously failed miserably at the last public hearing, but my goal is to try this evening to have the public hearing closed. We are here ready to roll up our sleeves and to work with the planning board to accomplish that. And that is all that I wanted to say, and happy to turn it back to you. Madam Chair, I think you're
So in turning it over, are you turning it back over to Mr. McGoldrick or Mr. Lubitz? Or are you turning it back over to me?
Back to you, Madam Chair. I mean, we have no further information to present. We've presented all of the information that was requested of us, as far as we understand.
All right. So your intervention makes me feel it's necessary to comment on the practice of the planning board at this moment. While we anticipated that we would be developing a set of conditions, we did not anticipate that those set of conditions were necessarily going to be completed or circulated prior to this meeting. We had asked for information that we expected would come from the applicant, and we did not make any further assumption that there would be a finality at this moment. What I think we anticipated is we would arrive at a decision about the next step, which would have that as one of its potential outcomes. So because of that, I feel I'm going to sort of start down the line and allow my colleagues on the planning board to speak about their thinking about the project based on the last presentation that we had, because that's where we stand. Is that all right with you?
Madam Chair, that's fine. I guess I'm a little confused. We were not told to be bringing any more information. We look back at the Zoom call from the last meeting, and I'm looking at the notes. Is that basically what Mr. Brodsky had said, was that the staff and town council be working on conditions towards a decision? So what, I guess we're missing something? I don't understand what.
Yeah, how can we give you conditions when we can't meet? We have an open meeting law. We can't be deliberating behind the scenes drafting conditions. I have drafted a decision, but it's just my thoughts at this point. And until the board starts its formal deliberations, I can't even circulate them. I got a number of comments from them tonight for you to look at. And I don't know where the idea came that we were going to have a draft set of conditions for you tonight.
We
can't do it. We
okay.
legally could not have met to do it. We could not have been able to deliberate and circulate to give you a board consensus set of conditions. Right now you have at least one members. I don't know how many of my colleagues have drafted conditions. And as soon as we deliberate, we'll circulate them and put something together, but we couldn't have done it. We could not have done it, legally done it for tonight's meeting.
So
just wait. I have an order here. I don't back and forth. Lauren, let me say that if the expectation was that the town staff were going to produce the set of conditions, I can see how you might have arrived at your understanding. But when we indicated that we were planning to do the draft of the findings, we didn't say anything about how or what would regulate our ability to act. So I'm just saying that as a fact. I'm not making any excuses. I'm just saying that as a fact. So now I'd like to ask Lauren Lynn to speak. Then I will ask George, and then I will ask Clark Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to say, I know it's been a while since our last meeting. There's been a bit of confusion. I think that the Zoom setting doesn't particularly help. So what I would like to suggest for this evening, I know that since our last meeting, our peer reviewer has had conversation with the applicant's team about parking. There's some discussion back and forth about an ADA space. I'd like to give some time to Darren Kirkjian to discuss where they stand. I'd like to hear from the peer reviewer's point if there's any other items that they feel are outstanding, or if they feel that that they are satisfied with the peer review at this point. I have prepared a technical review matrix that I think might be helpful to run through that. I'd like to point to the board members where decision points need to be made. I know we have our counsel joining us soon that can give a summary of the findings that need to be made by the board. And then I think that we turn back to the discussion at this point. What I'm hearing is that the applicant has submitted to their extent what they plan to submit. I think what we need to determine tonight is if the planning board feels there's more information, everything needs to be laid on the table right now. We need to know what information is going to be asked of the applicant, what the applicant would like to, if and what they would like to respond to certain comments. We have to keep in mind, I'll say this for all the board members, that some of the questions that the board members may have, it may be that you may not get an answer to it, but we'll determine that tonight. And then we determine where we go from here, what happens at the next meeting, and then we plan out a schedule as to how we spend our December meetings. That way we have all of us have a clear consensus on where we go from here. Madam Chair, does that sound okay with you? You're on mute.
That's exactly what we spoke about. So now I'm going to go back to the order of speaker request. Mr. McGoldrick.
Madam Chair, we're at your mercy. You 5 or 6 have the ability to approve the project or not approve the project. So we have to and will do whatever you guys want to do. All I'm saying is I'm looking at the minutes and we looked at the Zoom from the last meeting, and one of the reasons that we waited 5 weeks was that the board had said that it would take time for the staff and town council to write up the draft decisions. I understand that,
We did not say that.
Mr. Callahan, can I finish, please? So we understand Mr. Callahan had offered last time to write the decision. I don't care who writes the decision. Mr. Callahan is a very skilled lawyer. I don't care who writes the decision, but I just wanted the board to remember, we waited 5 weeks because the board said that they were going to be working the decisions. So when we started tonight and didn't have anything to say, it's because we were expecting that we were going to be talking about the decisions and the conditions. Be that as it may, we are here Lauren has got a good path to move forward, but I just want to give the reason as to why we are just here and didn't propose anything, because we were expecting the town to have something. So let's move forward with it, please. We'd love to. We're here. We have all the consultants on board, and we're happy to answer every question that comes forth.
Thank you. I'm going to call Clark Brewer, then I'm going to go to the peer review.
Yeah, my recollection was that there was the volunteer on the part of Jen and Lauren to start working on drafting a decision and conditions, but I didn't get the sense that there was by any means expected it to be in a complete manner, and I think it's really the sequence for this public hearing needs to be that we as a board get enough information so that we feel we can close the public hearing. If we feel, I think we got some information yesterday afternoon on this that certainly I've gone through, but I can see that it's possible that may take some more digestion or may have spawned further questions about what is being proposed and maybe some of the details of that. So I think the next step is for the board to decide whether we have enough information to make a decision. If we don't have enough information to close the public hearing, if we don't have enough information to close the public hearing, then we continue the public hearing. And then after we do close the public hearing, whenever that is, then we deliberate on the project, and basically it's up to the board to decide how that works. But it's basically the 6 of us with our consultants and municipal staff discussing the project, the pros and cons, what works and what doesn't work, and then after we think we've thoroughly discussed and deliberated, then we take a vote on this project, and as everybody knows, it's a 4 out of 5 member for approval. Now, one more thing is I have a list of things I have questions about based on the things that I got yesterday, and the responses from the applicant. I don't think right now is probably the best time to go through it, but I just wanted to kind of lay out what I thought the groundwork was and the sequence for our public hearing process.
Thank you for that, Clark. With this as an introduction and a sort of table setting, let's now proceed to the order of any responses from our peer reviewer to the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. I'm Darren Kirchen from Weston and Sampson, the peer reviewer. So at all the previous hearings, we've presented our comments on the site plan and special permit application, and sort of understand that any of the deviations from bylaws or HVBOD guidelines will be handled under conditions or waivers. We did receive this week some additional information on the ADA parking spaces at 124 Elm Street. So we did want to just present sort of our recommendation and kind of provide what our thinking is on the reading of the bylaw. Looking at the state regulations, the number of spaces is adequate at 124 Elm Street. There's 2 ADA parking spaces. However, the bylaw, the 244-9, does require potentially up to 1 more spot at 124 Elm Street, and that's if we're looking at the total project having 48 parking spaces. I think the applicant's interpretation is that there's only 35 because that's what's on their property. Because the driveway of the current parking lot is becoming the driveway of the actual applicant's development and non-residential, for both non-residential and residential purposes, we're conservatively viewing that whole property as one project, in which case it would need 3 ADA parking spaces. And that was the main comment that we had that was outstanding. There's less conservative ways to read that same bylaw. If the town views their parking lot as a separate project and property, it does have a shared driveway. So that was our reading of the bylaw to include requiring 3, not 2 spaces. And that's all I had for comments. I'm happy to discuss if helpful.
All right. Clark Brewer.
Yeah, Darren, I also took a look at the ADA requirements based on your comments and the applicant's response, and I come up with 15 spots that are in the western building, 23 spots that are in the new building across the street, and 21 spots that are in the shared parking lot. If you took the 38 spots that is a part of their building, I know there's 4 that are on site, that would fall into the 26 to 50 category of the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board MAAB requirement under 521 CMR 23, where between 26 and 50 they'd need two spots. So I looked at it, and it seemed like since they have one in the common parking spot, one handicap spot there, they've got a van spot in the north building and a single handicap spot in the west building, then it seemed like they had enough. There was a total of 3.
And that's a different, right? If the entire project is viewed as one, it's all this definition of the property. So if the entire project is viewed as one, we were calculating about 56 parking spots. And then again, the town bylaw is actually more conservative than what the state requires, and that has the threshold is above 40 total spots, but less than 100 would require 3. So that would be another interpretation, is to look at the entire project, say that the applicant is providing 3 locations, which is meeting the standard then of the town. It would, our most conservative reading was just looking at 124 in isolation as one, as that property alone could also need 3 spaces if you don't look at 87 Elm Street. But obviously this is one full project, so it's that was the only point we were going to raise.
I'll look at what's required under the town bylaw.
Yep.
But as far as MAAB, it looked like there were an adequate number of handicap spots. So let me just do that while you're going through the next item.
Yeah, and that's actually the only item, but yeah, it's between 25 and 40 spaces. There's either a percentage calculation, which would actually be less, but there's minimum. So if you have between 25 and 40 spots that you're providing, you need to have 2 ADA locations, but we're looking at 124 as one property and has 48 parking spots, including the town's location. It's also right next to the Veterans Memorial Park. So, I think there's one parking spot, one ADA location, and then there's one in the building. There's currently none on the town lot, so but we would just, if you're looking, the most conservative reading of the bylaw is that 3 spaces would be needed at 124 Elm Street. Again, there is the option to look at the whole property or both developments, in which case there are a sufficient number in total. But that's the interpretation of the planning board. We just wanted to highlight what's, the town has more conservative requirements than the actual state.
All right, so Clark, do you want to continue to search for the information
sorry,
you're
yes.
looking for and to go forward? Do you,
I'm just
Darren, do you have other comments to make?
No, I was just going to provide the citations to you at 244-9 in the town bylaws. But that was the only comment that we had that was kind of still open.
All right, so I'm gonna, Clark, do you want me to wait?
No, keep going. I'm gonna verify what Darren was just going through.
All right, so then what I'm gonna do is then move to the discussion of the planning board members. And this conversation is designed to allow you to reflect on what you feel are outstanding issues or other issues of concern. This is not to comment on the project's aesthetics per se, unless that is an issue of concern. And with that said, let me begin with Paul Grady.
Not a lot of commentary right now. I'm still digesting all the information sent out by Ms. North and by Lauren. So, but I wasn't prepared to make any decisions today. So I'm still digesting all that. And what the Mr. Kirkjian just said about, is it one project or 2 projects? It's just something that I have to weigh as far as, you know, the conservatism on the handicap lots. And to me, it seems like 2 right now, but you know, that's open to interpretation. That'd be pretty much what I have to say about that right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Eric Potter.
Hi, everyone. I think my comments are fairly consistent with what they were last time. I think, without speaking for the planning board members, I think a little bit of concern is that perhaps there are a number of conditions that a decision would be based upon that would relinquish some of the abilities of the planning board to really, you know, have an opinion on, let's just say my thing has obviously been the open space. So I'll just use that as an example. How is the open space going to be guaranteed to public use in perpetuity? What are the restrictions going to be on the open space if, say, residents of the condominium residents want to place restrictions on, you know, noise violations after 8 p.m. at night? You know, how's the public going to be protected against that? I think that's something that can be maybe extrapolated across some concerns that maybe in making a decision that's based upon unknown conditions like that across the board, because it looks like there are, you know, a number of topics where any approval would be based upon conditions. Again, I've been pleased with what I've seen, but I do understand where some members are coming from when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Are those your
I'm all
comments?
good.
Are those your comments for now?
Yeah, for right now, that's all, yeah.
All right, thank you. Paul Colery.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry for my delay. I understand the Zoom platform can be, present misunderstandings for people, but I think, my feeling hasn't changed much from last week, the last time we met, in that there did seem like there was a couple of questions raised by some of the members that I thought were going to get addressed tonight. And so what I think would be best for everybody, I mean, I know this is a big thing. I know it's been going on for a long time, but I feel like Tom brought up a really good point in the fact that we can't deliberate, we can't, meet and come up with things, conditions as such, outside of these meetings. So let's use tonight's meeting to run through the list of planning board members and say, this is what I would like to see. This is, and just that's it, just your few points, and then we'll know what the order of conditions are. I think collectively, we, I mean, the whole town, everyone collectively is in favor of this project getting approved, and these developers, want to move forward, obviously. I mean, the longer and longer it waits. So let's use tonight's time, which I don't think is a bad idea. I mean, I can't see my clock exactly, but we're certainly far ahead of schedule, what we thought we were going to be looking at tonight. So let's use our time that we have right now. Like I tell my children, stay where your feet are. Let's get it done. Identify these points, and then our next meeting, we're ready to go. There's no confusion. There's no who's gonna, put this thing together. Here are the conditions that I'm looking for. Here are the conditions that I'm looking for. Everyone's satisfied. Maybe not all of the conditions will be met, and within reason, and then we'll take our vote. I mean, I know it's a big deal, and everyone's stressed out about the vote, and this is going to be the change for the harbor for the next 50 years. Yeah, everybody, I think, gets that. But we still need to vote on the project. The town gave us the authority to approve this project, and what we have seems like developers that have been very cooperative in addressing, most of the things that were presented. And I would say, let's do that. That would be my suggestion. Otherwise, I have no comments, otherwise. So.
All right, thank you. So I want to call on Tom Callahan first, then Paul Grady, then Eric Potter. Tom?
I apologize for my frustration and my anger, but, on our side, we're completely constricted by the open meeting law under what can have. I have some comments. I put them in writing today, gave them to Lauren so she could share them on the board right here, but I wished I could have given that to you yesterday. I really wish I could, so that we could have a meaningful discussion about this. But I don't get a clear answer on my side what I can distribute and what I can't distribute. I know I can't distribute deliberations amongst my fellow board members. So, like I said, no way were we going to be ready to discuss conditions tonight, at least from a board's perspective. So I'm prepared to close the hearing tonight. If the comments that I and others make tonight don't generate more information from the applicant, that's fine. I noticed in the exchange of letters between the applicant and Weston and Sampson, a lot of it is, response, put it in a condition, make it a condition. Okay, so I've done that. That's fine. And that could be the way we deal with all of this. But in any event, Lauren, I don't know if you want to pull up what I had so people can see it. I needed to organize my thoughts in writing. So
Before you do that, can we get around a little bit further and then potentially go in that direction? I feel like Paul Caleri's point is a good one. There were things that were spoken about last meeting that have not been addressed. There are items that are still outstanding that should be addressed. And I think if we have a document in front of us, it'll mean that it'll focus our attention and we may lose other things. So if we can hold that at bay.
What it is I put together, just so everybody knows, are my thoughts, issues, concerns based on what I have written so far as a draft decision, which is quite lengthy, quite comprehensive in my view, but it's still just my opinions. I do think the applicant should be clued into things we're all thinking, and tonight's the night to do that. So, Amy, fine, I don't care when we discuss it, but at some point tonight, I'd like to convey this information to the applicant.
And that's fine. I just feel like if we have that in front of us before we actually get the other items out on the table, it will become confused and we will not know what is people's opinions versus statements that you have written. So we have plenty of time. We're early in the evening, and I think we should go ahead and get the planning members' comments out. So thank you.
That's what I'm attempting to do, but I'll defer to you. Thank you.
Okay, Paul Grady and then Eric Potter.
And Paul Cleary had an interesting point that the town gave us the approval, the authority, I'm sorry, to approve this project. They also gave us the authority to disapprove of the project depending on what goes. But, and I hope it does go, I hope it's successful. But I will say the things that concern me that I really haven't heard is, I've heard some talk about it, is the low-income housing, the component there. I'm out on that one. And I'd like to see that clarified. And again, I parrot along with Eric as to the open spaces. You know, what's to stop the tenants or the new owners from, you know, putting up their own set of restrictions? I mean, they're going to be paying, you know, a nice bit of change for what I'm sure will be a nice unit. But what's to stop them from down the road in perpetuity blocking? You're going to have people, you're going to have turnover, and what is going to stop that open space? And I am also concerned about the commercial aspect, you know, with what the developers are seeking compared to what is supposed to be there. So those are the things that are on my mind as far as this project goes. And it's just something to throw back out on the table. And I know Tom probably has a lengthy list, and so I'm sure we're going to get to it. So thank you very much.
Okay, Eric Potter.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is, you know, are we looking for answers from the developers or conditions? And I think there's got to be a distinction between the two so that developers have the opportunity to get us the answers they want. And I could see how there could be a misinterpretation 5 weeks ago on the direction this was going, because there was a feeling that we were ready to approve or go, you know, getting closer to that end with a number of conditions that still need to be satisfied. It sounds more like tonight to me that there are answers that are still needed from the developer. So for me, this is why concern 5 weeks ago when I knew we weren't going to be meeting and there was such a gap in between, and that there's nothing we could do about it at the time. But you know, with such a lengthy period of time in between meetings, I just think it hurts everyone. I do think it would be helpful to have a clear understanding of what are answers and what are potentially, you know, conditions that we don't need specific answers on from the developer, but we can condition any approval on, so that everybody knows and there's no confusion or ambiguity.
All right, thank you. I'm going to take a minute to make a few comments. So we've seen a lot of work done to design a physical site. And we have had more than one configuration. The configuration was changed and lessened the size of the project on one side of the structure of the development. When I think about where we are, I go back to the first principles, which is what is the purpose of the Harbor Village Business Overlay District Special Permit? And it says three things. It says a vibrant mix of uses, including multifamily residential, to support increased public access, activate the edges of Border Street and Summer Street and Cohasset waterfront, and increase the commercial links between Cohasset Harbor and Cohasset Village. What I can say that I know is about the site. I know what we have been told about the site, but in terms of the program that's embedded in the overlay district special permit, I've heard very little about the actual program. How are we going to achieve the objectives of the Harbor District Special Permit? And when we had the configuration of the building with the cars in an underground garage, we had one potential for the use of space at the street level that had multi-purpose potential, that I could see how we could design a program. That is, you have to program development. It just doesn't come out of nowhere. And once that was removed, that changes the potential for the liveliness and the activity that's possible in that place. So for me personally, there needs to be a thought out process of how are we going to not just have a park, but how are we going to have this be an animated space that people are interested in going to, and that doesn't by default, because it's not got a program of any kind, to become a set of private residences. And there, if we don't have the understanding, don't have the conversation, don't have the ideas and the sense of what's possible, that leaves everything open, absolutely everything in terms of activating the area completely open. Another issue that I think is important, and I raised it in very early in the discussion of the peer reviews, is I do not accept the transportation plan. The transportation plan is using calculations out of a book about a normal place on a normal day with no consideration for the physical setting that we are dealing with. We are dealing with a unique landscape feature, a harbor. It's got a sinewy road that goes around it. We've got properties surrounding the area that are experiencing significant transformative potential. And for us to approve this and to condition it, but not discuss what these scale of issues are, is basically punting the ball down the field, but they're going to come up somewhere. And so I think that it's important that at least my understanding of what the business overlay district permit is expecting, I haven't seen it yet. I've seen transformative architecture. I've seen an attempt to meet many of the town's objectives about the physical thing, but what I haven't heard about is how are we going to meet the expectations of making the harbor an active, attractive location. And if that's being left fully to the town, then the town needs to really understand that's its responsibility. And that this is in no way a public-private partnership in that both the residential and the non-residential are successful only because they work together, not because they coexist. And so that's one of the issues that I have a concern about. I definitely have a concern about the transformative potential of the region around the harbor. We already know that there are prime properties that are on the market. We have reviewed them. They're going to come onto market with houses and cars. And so we've got a transportation plan that basically is basically dealing with a reality as if it is now, as opposed to what an active area would be in the future. And as planners, we have to take that into account. We can't assume that's, the town is going to go, oh my, we need to widen the road. Oh, but it's 10 years too late. We have to actually think about these things, because this isn't a single home. This is an entire project. And it has impacts that go way beyond individual actions. So for me, I think from the structure side of things, we've come a long way. I do think that one area that we have not spoken about at all, but is definitely going to be an issue, is the infrastructure that's actually going to embrace the building, right? So the seawall, We never have spoken anything about the seawall or the relationship between the project and the harbor plan. And in the harbor plan, it's pointed out that the seawall is not going to last much longer. So so we've done the job of building the project. What we haven't done is built the context for the successful embedding of the project. And those are my general comments.
Amy,
Clark Brewer?
the comments I made had to do with the sequencing of the hearings, but no specific comments like what the other board members have. So I'd like to just quickly put my thoughts on the table, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Okay, I agree completely with some of the things that Amy has just brought up, that if you look at the purpose statement of the harbor overlay, basically it says, you know, it complementary mix of commercial and residential uses, contribute to public activity, increased public commercial activity. I think that the bylaw anticipated an exciting mixed-use project, and I think that there's still potential for this to be an exciting mixed-use project, but I think there's some holes in what the applicant has given us for that, to confirm that, and I would say some of it has to do with for me as an architect, the generic sort of the simplingness of, if that's even a word, of some of the exterior materials and details. I've asked several times for like a homeowners association and a commercial owners association, whatever that is, bylaws, because they have the potential to address exactly what Amy is talking about in terms of and Eric, in terms of those uses that they don't get over time. If the homeowners association and the commercial owners association aren't separated, one could totally overwhelm the other and basically get rid of all the commercial space, which is the thing that I've been concerned about since the beginning of even talking about this as a bylaw change, but certainly through every hearing. So to me, and as well as I think the signage, the site signage, I think the applicant requested that this be, you know, just a condition as a part of a condition approval that the town planner could review and run by us maybe or not. I don't know, but I think that the signage also has the potential to address some of the policy issues that Eric Potter has brought up on how that public space gets used, when it can be used, and whether there's an easement that's created, whether there's for example, whether there's a view corridor easement that's a legal entity that has some conditions. I kind of think just showing the easement and just showing the walkway on the front don't tell the whole story in terms of what problems that could be or what benefits that might be down the road. And I just think, for the sake of understanding what the application is, those sort of invisible things that are in between, you know, what we see in a plan and a site plan, a civil engineering plan, and an architectural plan, the sections and elevations and views. These are the things that exist in between those things that establish policy and use restrictions that I think could be significant for this project. I brought up the sequencing of public to private spaces being critical elements of this design. And I think I cited the glass balcony as problematic for that. Now, in the site plan, I've seen some attempts to screen, but I still see some of the details that seem like they're problematic in terms of understanding the public private relationships in a project like this. I mean, it's really important that the homeowners have their privacy, and it's equally important that the public have the access rights that they expected. And I don't think we can kick that issue down the road. I don't think we could decide what I think that's a part of this public hearing where we review what the applicant proposes and how he's going to meet the goals of the bylaw. And it's not just in basically they have a good design. I think that basically that they've sort of lessened the project. I think it's pretty good. I just don't see that the commercial component is really working the way the bylaw intended yet. But there's a number of details that I'm concerned about. One is that water's edge, whether it's the seawall that meets. I was down there at high tide today, and geez, at high tide the water comes above the street over on Margin Street, and there isn't much room there. If there's a section of rubble stone that's the northerly third of the waterfront that looks like it needs some help. The reinforced concrete sections that run towards the Veterans Park seem like they're generally in pretty good shape, but there's a lot of surface breaking up. Those may be problematic too. But if you really look at that street edge, there's basically going to be a curb, like a 12-inch curb, and nothing on the ocean side. So at dead low tide, you've got quite a drop off there. There's no proposed guardrails or any other protections there. And if you look at the renderings, it just shows the curb and people walking by it. In some cases at low tide, it could be problematic or dangerous. Not that we have to have guardrails all the way around the harbor. It's just that where we're constrained in this narrow walkway, I really think I need to see a section through that walkway area showing what the paving materials are. Is there a guardrail in part? And does any of that seawall get rebuilt as a part of this project? That whole area doesn't have any detail. I mean, we haven't seen anything. I mean, the civil engineer shows the silt sock and the handicap access signage post, but nothing through the seawall. I think that's a detail that the applicant should think through and propose something specific. Like the paving is indicated on the plans for that walkway as TBD. I don't think that's enough information. Now, when they go through their approval through Chapter 91, whatever they propose to us might change. And we understand that, and that's okay. I just think we need to know what they want to use. And if it changes, then we go for a modification later. So on the policy things, the signage and the homeowners and commercial owners association policy, I think can make a big difference, just to recap. But there's a couple of other things I noticed in the most recent elevations that the small roofs aren't called out as copper anymore, although they have a coppery color like they were on the previous drawings. I think I would want them to, because some of those materials kind of got more generic from the original to the current architectural set. An 8-inch exposure of shingles, sort of atypical. I think it. I don't agree with that as a finish, and it's really hard to tell with these drawings, even on a large screen that I have, what the exposure of the cedar shingle is. And I was surprised by blowing it up a number of times and getting to 8 inches. So I think that would be an error, and I'd like to see, if that's what they want to do, maybe a mock-up or something like that. There's something called engineered trim. We haven't seen any lighting cut sheets, and I don't think that's something that we can kick the can down the road. Although what the landscape architect put in there is, path lighting and what they describe and the locations seem fine, but we haven't seen any cut sheets. And I think that there's a reality to a project that that the developer needs to commit to. And here's another example. HVAC equipment, what the noise ratings are. I think I've mentioned this a number of times. I'm not going to bring up the glass balconies again. Oh, I guess I just did. The garage doors and the section in between. It appears that there's like two 10-foot openings at the main garage on the eastern side. I think that post in the middle is going to get knocked out by the first in the first 6 months. Based on the bylaw, it appears, and Cavanaro's drawing seemed to show the parking spaces and the drive aisles accurately, according to what is required in the bylaw. The width at the building face, there's several different looks like approaches for that. I'd be happy, and I think it conforms with the bylaw, if the developer committed to making single 20-foot wide openings where they pass through the wall construction. But I don't see any dimensions of those, and in some cases it looks like it's 10 and 10, and I think those are problematic and will probably get damaged. The elevators, I think you're going to need stretcher-sized elevators here. I'd like to get confirmation from your architect to confirm that you don't need stretcher elevators, or that's the size of the elevator cab that goes up from the garages into the units. Multifamily projects that I've worked on that are similar to this, we've had single elevator, not 3 or 4, but they have been stretcher size. And I think 2010 or 11 is when the elevator code required stretcher size elevators. But there may be an exemption, and I'd be pleased to see that. Right now, the elevators look too small. There's some noting on the landscape plan of kiosks in the view corridor area. I think the kiosk idea is a good one in potentially seasonally activating the public and outdoor space, but not if it's in the view corridor. Those are the main points that I had for the applicant. So my sense is I think the applicant still has some homework to do, and a number of these things I've brought up under several other planning board meetings, and I haven't seen them. So those are my comments.
Are there other planning board members that would like to speak? Tom?
I would like to get to my substantive comments. Again, I'm frustrated that I can't distribute a decision. Without putting my thing up on the screen, I'll just go over it. Under the category of things we've previously discussed or I've raised, I'm still not happy with the height of the buildings. And the new set of plans, I'm not sure how high the buildings actually are over the existing structures. And I don't think anybody in the town knows that. And, I need to see it visually. I appreciate the fact that Is there any way?
Tom, can you reduce your video because you're breaking up? Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm wondering, is there any way that we can actually depict on site what the height of the new buildings will be over the existing buildings? Whether, I mean, as simple as putting a pole on the top, or is there a computer simulation or something we can do? Because I don't think anybody has an appreciation of how much taller these buildings are going to be. I've mentioned it before, and we don't seem to have an answer. I'm not clear of how high the current buildings are in the latest proposal. That leads me to also just mention, you know, we focus so much on the buildings at 124. We haven't talked much about the building at 87 at all. It's going to be a lot bigger. I'm disappointed that I don't think we've heard from any of the direct abutters and what their thoughts are. But, you know, I have some concerns about changes that are proposed for the boundary between 87 and the house next door, which I believe is number 85. I know that Weston and Sampson said there were no street plantings. I don't know if that building can be set back from the street a little bit more, because again, I understand why we're moving things closer to the street to get space on the harbor side, but these are big buildings and there's going to be sort of this canyon effect going down Elm Street. And you know, we just haven't talked about the building at 87 that much. On inclusionary zoning, you know, my only point is I don't think that we, the board, and the applicant have come to any consensus about what the solution of that is going to be. I've written a condition to deal with that if there's no agreement on it, but, you know, I think, you know, I don't see that we're at any consensus, and I don't know if we want to discuss that further. The commercial spaces, I'm actually okay with what's proposed in the last set of plans, except I would take away one of the amenity areas in the west building and I would make it another commercial space. You know, parking frustrates me because, you know, it's the automobile is generating so much about design here. The fact that we need to park all these cars seems to me dictating the change from the first floor units to now all second floor units. It's probably dictating height. And I just wondered if there was any possible discussion of the grass field across the street at Margin and Stockbridge as some type of intermittent use. I mean, I know it has zoning constrictions for commercial use, but you know, to the extent it helps parking problems, I'm just wondering if we could discuss that field. Under the topic of things that I was including in my draft that we haven't really discussed, I had drafted some conditions following on Eric's comments about public control of the amenity space, you know, the public amenity space in the Harbor Walk. There's two ways we can go on that, but I do want to make sure that the public has control of the space and is not brought into a future conflict with the condo association. And I think there's easy conditions to deal with that. I'd like to see, you know, the boundary line along the town parking lot just straightened out. It's a jagged mess right now. I just would rather see it straightened out. In the draft conditions I wrote, I raised the issue of a performance bond. We haven't talked about that. I mean, what if something goes wrong and this project is abandoned halfway through? We'd certainly be doing one for a subdivision, and I think we need to consider a performance bond here. The other big thing that I'm proposing, and that we haven't discussed much, and I perhaps raised it before, was redesigning the intersection of Elm, Market, and Cove. And I would like to see the applicant participate in helping us do that redesign, because I think the redesign of that intersection can help address some of the traffic concerns that Weston and Sampson have raised. And to the extent that the building's heights cannot be addressed and lowered, I think that reorienting the green space at that intersection can have the benefit of creating a sense of setback that the existing hotel has. We're making the trade-off for the open space on the harbor side by bringing the buildings closer to the street. Well, there's going to be all of this mass and height at the street, which we do not have today. And I think that that mass and height can be ameliorated in some degree if we redesign that intersection and move the green space that exists there today up close to the property by eliminating Cove Road. And I sketched out some sketches of possible idea. But I think this project has an impact on the safety of that intersection, which I already think is not the safest. Weston and Sampson has raised some traffic concerns because of the two access points to the property. And then again, to ameliorate the height and the mass of the building, because I think this is a massive change from what we have out there now, and I don't think everybody appreciates it. And the drawings we've seen haven't satisfied me.
Hey, Tom, good
Yeah.
point on that. And we are working on the potential redesign for Elm Street.
Yeah, and let me just tell you, what I'm suggesting in my draft decision is the suggestion is merely that the applicant help basically pay for the design work to redesign it. Obviously, it's town property and it's going to be the town's responsibility to do the construction and build a redesign. But I think there's enough impacts created by this project to that intersection that the applicant should participate in helping solve the problem of that intersection. Because like I said, I think there's two benefits in two completely different areas that a redesign.
I think that's a great idea, Tom. The municipal, we're trying to get our act together on the municipal side first, but it makes sense. I think what you're talking about, that could be a condition as a part of the.
Lauren, can you put up the sketch I did of that? I don't know if that's possible, Lauren, if you're out there.
You can do that. Bear with me one moment, please.
It's the one that says sketch for condition 55. I mean, it's a wild idea, but I think it's something we need to think about. While she's doing it, I mean, getting back to the height, I would like to see something out there that I can visually see and that the public can visually see, that we know what the highest point of the new buildings would be as. I would like to see the applicant think real hard about how the height of these buildings can be lowered. And so there's a sketch I did. And if you see underneath those hash marks, those black hash marks, you can see where the existing triangle of green space is up in the upper left. And I'd like to see it shifted towards the property. And I think that sense of setback will ameliorate the impact of the mass and the height that we're now shifting to the street. You know, today, the hotel has a small setback. The houses around there have small setback.
Hey, Tom, your sketch isn't a lot different than the 3 or 4 versions. One, which the applicant's consultant put together.
All right.
I think everybody's lining up on this one.
Okay, well, that's great. That's great. If that's, but you know, it doesn't. Doing this doesn't change the fact that I think efforts should be made to reduce the height of these buildings. But certainly, if that cannot be done in any feasible way, then I think this as some form of mitigation to the height and mass now being moved to the street would be very helpful. And we haven't discussed it before, so I wanted to bring it up to you. I guess that's it. On the inclusionary zoning, just so I'm clear, I do not think, and I've made this clear, that simply taking a payment in lieu to sit in some bank account for some possible future project is the way to go. My proposal is that we start with the condition that 3 units have to be put in this project, and I'm okay with putting them all in the west building rather than in the more expensive Oceanside buildings. But, if it's going to be done off-site, we just need to have something definitive and concrete by the time of issuing occupancy permits for the west building. So it may be you'll do a payment. You'll pay somebody, or the town or some other developer, to help develop units off-site. But doing something where we get actual units resulting in the short term is monumentally different than just writing a check and stuffing it in a town bank account where it may be used, may never be used. We need to use this opportunity where we haven't with other projects that I can see that have multi-units to get actual affordable units as we are adding to our housing denominator. So, that's written as a condition. If you want to discuss and come to some agreement on how to do the affordable housing, that's fine, but I think it needs to be done. So that's all I have to say. These comments were put in writing, and I'll just, now that they're out there, I will distribute them.
They
so
can go into the public record.
George and his team can see them in writing.
I'd just like to say a few other comments. And this, this is somewhat of an unusual situation in which this is a project that is being designed and developed by a member of our community. They put a lot of effort involved in it. And I think everybody has the same objectives. But at least I feel my responsibility is to apply the same standard I would if I was in Atlanta and asking Atlanta for the or specifying the requirements for a project in Atlanta to meet the expectations of the citizens that live there. So there were a few things that I left out off my list that I asked from the very beginning because I worry about them. And I've seen them go bad, and they can be horrendous in an environment that is mixing soil and water. So for example, I asked that there be a geotechnical study. You need to know what's underneath, and you need to know what can be possible there. And that building that sits there is not occupied on a permanent basis. So its load factor is going to be different than whatever else you propose to put up. And so from the standpoint of the safety of the public and the public interest, it's our responsibility to be able to know something about that. If we were in the desert, it'd be a different story, but we're not in the desert. We're in an ocean environment with impact of multiple environmental factors, and people do it. The Newburyport did it. Places do it because they need to know. The second is I asked for a simulation. So ArcGIS has a simulation, AutoCAD has a simulation. Most of the questions that we're asking right now, the questions we don't have the answers to, could easily be solved visually with an animated 3D model. And a kid and a freshman senior in college in an architecture program could do that. And the reason to do it is not just because it will make us feel better or that we'll know more, but because it actually ends up saving money when you do the project. It's like an environmental impact statement. In the end, it saves money because you learn a lot of things that you cannot see until you try to actually make it into 3D and to animate it. A third item, which I didn't say, but I still feel very strongly about, is the whole notion of what is going to embrace the entire project is unclear. I feel like we started to talk about sidewalks. They seem so simple, but they're already themselves totally inefficient. So planning the edge of that project to make it beautiful and to make it safe and to make it inviting, we started to talk about it, but we don't have evidence. My diagrams, I can't use my diagrams to visualize what's likely to happen. I want to ask, what was this, and this is important for trying to understand. I feel like there was a big trade-off when you went from having an underground garage and the commercial on the first floor, and now we don't. And I'd like to understand, and then I will let you say something, George, because I can see you want to say something. But what I feel is that there was a loss of some sort of openness and almost community likeness that gets lost when it becomes a much more inclusive but almost exclusive residential setting. And there are parts of it that are not residential, but the entire sense of what it was going to mean changed. And I'm just wondering why that decision was made. What was in your mind going to be the trade-offs? And then finally, I think that a lot of this discussion tonight could have been really enabled by having new sets of drawings after we had our conversation. I know that it's really frustrating, but you know, 4 or 5 sets of drawings are not completely out of the realm when you're dealing not with a house and not with a square box, but you're dealing with a setting and you're changing a setting. And the only way you can figure it out is by seeing it as it's evolving. And we've talked over the last 2 meetings about evolution, and you know, we had our second set of drawings, but we had discussion and changes, and that changed the physical experience of that space. So thank you. George, would you like to speak now?
I almost don't know where to start. So if I start, Madam Chair, with some of your comments, when the change from the underground parking to the first level did nothing to the commercial space, did not change the commercial space, with the exception of adding about 100 square feet more commercial space. The building footprints are almost exactly the same. We were very careful when we made that change. And one of the reasons we made the change, actually, there was 2 reasons we made the change. There was a lot of concern from the board about climate change issues and whether the garage could in fact handle that, even though that's a 1-level garage and there's 5 to 7-story garages all along every major seaport city. We felt that was a concern of the board. So that was one of the reasons. The second reason was Mr. Callahan was very concerned about the massing and the unit count. And there was traffic study issues that you had. So we reduced the unit count by 20%. So we've already reacted to what we thought were 2 of the major concerns of the board. But the plans that you're talking about, the last set of plans you saw, did not change the commercial space, did not change the outdoor space, did not change all the public vibrance, all the public space. So I'm not sure where you're asking for a new set of plans. We gave those in the last meeting. Those plans did not change any of the commercial space, did not change any of the outdoor space. So I'm just real confused as to where you might have gotten that. So I'm going to ask Ted to bring up the plans just so everyone can see.
I agree with you, George. I didn't think they changed either. So that's why I said I was fine with what you were proposing. So.
Just the overshow, showing the footprint. Yep.
Which one, the footprint?
Yep. Is the one with all the green space on it?
Yeah, I mean,
okay. While Ted's bringing that up, I'd also like to address, and again, Madam Chair, do you want, I mean, there was about 24 comments listed. I'm more than happy to take the time to go through all of them, but I think I should address the major ones. So here's the set of plans that were received, and there's no difference from the last set to this set, with the exception of maybe between the two buildings, there's now an above grade just between the two buildings there, nothing that's to the public. That was all part of the private space. I'm looking at the notes, the geotech study, we've done some studies, the load factor. There's a 57,000 square foot concrete building on there, concrete block building. We're replacing with about a 36,000 square foot wood building. So the load factor probably is going to be less than half. The massing issue, we're at 0.73 of the FAR. 0.73, we could have got, not only could we have gone to 1, we could have gone over 1. We're at 3/4 of what could have been done. To Mr. Callahan's issue about the height, that we're within the zoning code of the height. We're within the zoning code, and the requirements to make it like a downtown area, so the building should be right at the street, is what the requirements are. It's not, it wasn't our idea. It was to have the 0 setback and put it out by the street. I do love your design about the Elm Street corridor and getting more green space. I know that the neighbors that live right adjacent to our buildings, who, by the way, have seen the buildings and have sent letters to the board. I know that they would love to have that section of Elm Street changed, because the cars come around, they're flying around there at high speeds. So making a 90-degree turn is a great solution for that park. The vibrant, the other, I think the major issue that we obviously did not communicate properly was meeting the intention of the bylaw and meeting the intention of the harbor plan. The harbor plan was very specific. They wanted a view corridor and they wanted access to the waterfront. So we've given them not just the view corridor that was in the original harbor plan, which is just a small little square straight. We've given them that whole section of the Margin Street side, significantly greater than what the harbor plan asked for. We're more than happy to give an easement over that so that it never changes. That's certainly simple enough to do. In terms of the vibrancy of the whole area, I think you've heard from a number of the residents and the abutters about how opening up the waterfront is what everyone has been asked for and doing. And we're not just opening up the 10 feet that's required by the town, by the state chapter 91. We're not opening up by the 25 feet that the town has for. We're opening up by almost 50 feet. And we are making it vibrant because we've got commercial use within the buildings that can have 4 to 6 different tenants. And we're offering commercial use outside the buildings with kiosks. We've had conversations, as you well know, with CSCR, with CMI. We've talked about having downtown tenants, taking some of the kiosks and using them to be attractive to get people back down to downtown so we can help the downtown residents. I think that we've done a pretty good job of taking an area right now that is basically not accessible to the public and making it a vibrant place. What we can't do, Madam Chair, is one of the things you've been asked before. We can't program exactly what commercial spaces go in there. We obviously wanted something that is going to be successful, but we can't say that it's going to be X, Y, or Z because it's commercial space. It's not, and we've told you ideas that we've had about getting the Lucky Finn type model down there where people can not only get something to eat, but they can also sit and have a meeting there inside or outside the building. So I'm disappointed that we didn't communicate properly what I thought we've been talking about. And I agree with Mr. Callahan 100%. These Zoom meetings are awful. It's awful not to be able to look you guys in the eye, to remind people about what we've talked about. Having a 5-week break between has been awful. But we will do whatever you guys need us to do. I just need you to understand we don't have a significant amount of more time to spend investigating this. I think we've hit the major points: the view corridor, the access, the open space at the waterfront, the commercial space, reducing the size of the structures, reducing the unit counts. We've hit the major points. Inclusionary zoning, agree 100% with what Mr. Callahan said. Make it a condition. We've already had numerous conversations with the Housing Trust. I see Mr. Jeffries is on. He can talk to it as well. We think we've come up with some good ideas, but we can't pull the trigger on something yet until we know that we have a project. but we definitely will make it a condition, and we're definitely not going to write a check. We're going to make sure that we create the housing. And Mr. Jeffries can confirm that we've had 3 or 4 different good ideas that we're going to pursue as soon as we know that we got a project to go forward. A lot of the things that Mr. Brewer talked about, those are design issues that really come into the final. Please make them a condition, but to start talking about what the exact pavers are, we kind of were looking for guidance from the town on that. Happy to make that a condition. I'm happy to make all this a condition, but we can't totally design this project without knowing that we're going forward. That's not how things are done. I'm sorry, I've been doing this for too long. We're trying to hit the main issues, and then if the issues that can't be resolved, I mean, the whole Mr. Potter's whole issue about the public space. Chapter 91 requires that the public has access, but we're going to go over and above that, and we're going to create a document with the town to ensure that there's public space and it's there. So again, we're here to do whatever you want us to do. I'm disappointed that you didn't hear a lot of what we said over the last 6 months, but we'll do whatever we can to repeat it and make all you guys happy, because that's what we have to do. Thanks.
Good.
Thank you. Tom Callahan?
And I hear where you're coming from, George, and like I said earlier, I'm prepared to close this and go forward because I think we can, but my colleagues might not all agree. But in terms of the height, are you able to do something on site or in the model that Amy suggested to show us the height of the new buildings compared to the other?
Yes, we will figure it out. One of the ideas we've offered 4 weeks ago to bring you guys out to the site, we had Kevin Arrow go out and mark the site. to where the building
I saw
points
that and I appreciate that. But
Okay.
it doesn't go up.
We could have met you out there and showed it. Yeah, we can fly a balloon. We could take you downtown. I mean, if you stand next to the Pilgrim Bank building on the corner there, it's not going to be that high. So yes, we'll find examples downtown. But you actually can get a scale of what is there. The building is not set back along Margin Street. You can stand on Margin Street, the building's right there.
Yeah.
So we will definitely set something up, whether it's flying a balloon, or I'll hang Ted from the telephone pole, and we'll
I want you to be clear. I don't have a problem with the massing of the building per se and moving it to the street. I know that's the bylaws objectives. It's a valuable trade-off to get the open space behind. But I just think the public and myself don't really have a full sense of how much different that will be compared to the look that's there today.
Yeah, and as I said, it's definitely going to be different because everybody else wants to have the waterfront access.
Well, I know, I get it.
And so as you said it eloquently, we're moving a big building from one area to the other. That's exactly what we're doing.
Can I ask another question that's based on Amy and Clark both mentioned the seawall, and my draft condition is haven't discussed the seawall. Who owns the seawall right now?
We do. We believe we do.
Okay.
We've had people look at it. It's not only in good shape, but it's about, there was a significant high tide of over 11 and a half 3 or 4 weeks ago. Plus there was a storm out at sea. So there was probably another foot
I'm
increase.
just thinking,
And
I'm only asking the question in terms of future responsibility. I don't want to inadvertently give the town responsibility for a seawall that doesn't have responsibility for today.
Right. No, we know that we own it. But I want you to know that we have looked at it. And it is, even with the high tide, which again, it was 11 and a half high tide, probably surged another foot. We still had 3 feet of our seawall there. So we're very happy. I know that the area by Margin Street that you talked about, but that's because where the Roy property meets the town dock, there's 2 openings, and the water rushes through those 2 openings.
Okay.
Lauren,
And,
saw your hand? Lauren, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. I just first wanted to note that our special counsel, Karis North, she arrived several minutes ago. If you wanted to defer to her for any comments, and if you wanted her to review the summary of findings that she created for the board. And in addition, I just again wanted to flag, I would ask the chair if you would find it to be helpful to go through the matrix I created. I'd be happy to do so. Please let me know. Madam Chair, you're muted.
I recognize George's comments about the work that you did to change the project. And I think one of the interesting issues associated not just with Zoom, but with a project which is moving, constantly moving, is you probably said 10 things. I didn't know you did them. There are things you've done which are just fine, and it's not something that you can necessarily log. But from our perspective, we're responsible for having the answers to questions that we don't have answers to, and some we may overlook, we may not interpret correctly. It's not intentional, but what I would say is that this is a case in which you have generated a diary, and we just haven't read it all. A lot of the things you said weren't things that we necessarily, you spoke about talking to various people, doing various things, and that's really true. But for us, we just deal with black and white, what shows up in the mail. And it may make it difficult when something's moving quickly. So I just want to acknowledge all the work that you've done. Eric, go ahead.
George, it's just important and for everybody. I don't, my position, I just was using that as an example, and I don't need to belabor this, for months on end here. I think I've been pretty clear on my position, support for you guys in the project here. And if it's something with my particular issue, that's something that, is something we can condition and take care of it after closing the meeting as part of the approval, I'm totally on board with that. And maybe I was just misinterpreted with the examples of where I thought maybe some other concerns were lying, but I don't, especially, my concern is more with these Zoom meetings, like Amy was saying, is it does seems to delay the communication process a little bit more. And I think everyone's done a good job of really getting across what this project's going to be. And if the conditions satisfy and protect everybody moving forward, then I personally, I don't have many more questions myself. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
George McGoldrick.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question about, I think Eric mentioned it earlier about questions answered and then things to be conditioned. If there are any major questions to be answered, we're here to answer them. If there are a number of things that can be part of the conditions, I think Mr. Callahan mentioned one of them was number 55. I'm kind of curious how many pages he's got there, but if at some point in time, the planning board closes the hearing, will we be allowed to work with the planning board on when the conditions are being discussed? And maybe it's a Karis question or an Adam question, but I guess a concern is that we close the hearing and then we don't participate in what happens, because what's unfortunate is that you might make a condition that just makes the whole project unfeasible, or you might make a condition that we can even better. So we just want to make sure that we have the right to participate in what is being done on the planning board. So I was curious about whether or not if it's closed, that we can participate. I've done that in other towns, so I'm just curious about how it's done here.
Tom, and then if necessary, Karen.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if we close the hearing tonight, myself and anybody else on the board who's written any kind of condition or is going to, I don't have any problem that we also distribute those to the applicant at the same time. My experience too, being both counsel to a board and counsel to an applicant, is that applicants can participate in the deliberations. We just have to be careful that the hearing is closed and we're not receiving quote unquote new information. But certainly we can all sit down and participate in the drafting and comment on it. I don't think it should be a gotcha moment, we're doing this. So I have no problem with what George is talking about. I've experienced the same thing he has.
So I see Karis. I'd like to ask Eve, and I can only report from what I know. Karis North.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. In my experience, especially with Zoom and COVID, the boards that I have worked with have kept the hearings open to prepare the conditions so that there can be an open discussion about the conditions. I've also, worked with council. Obviously, the planning board and the town are my client. Adam has your client. After I hear from my client what they'd like to take a look at things, work them out, have some conversations with, the applicant's counsel and back and forth, and then, take something back to my client and get it prepared for the next meeting is sort of standard practice in working through these types of applications and conditions.
Thank you. Eve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too have seen it done both ways. I think it's important, obviously, that any conditions that the board puts on are things that the applicant is willing to do. And again, as Mr. McGoldrick said, doesn't kill the project if the purpose is to approve it, if the board has chosen that. But I also had a possible idea for Mr. Brewer's comments about the design and the signage. And I think you can make those conditions that you can approve it and then require that somewhere after the process begins, before the building permit or before an occupancy permit, that the applicant has to provide the draft HOA and all the other kinds of conditions, and maybe a whole sign package and a design package for, exact materials that could be approved by the board, as the step goes forward, so that the applicant doesn't have to set it in stone right now, but that the board has a chance to see it and make sure that it meets you can provide general idea now, and then they don't have to do it until later. And those small pieces could come back to the board as part of the conditions. I've seen that happen as well. So it's up to the board.
Just to follow up on that, for site plan review, we usually get a final revised site plan that we would approve, that would incorporate everything that happened during the hearings, as well as the latest thinking on the project. Perhaps that's that opportunity.
Mr. Brodsky, would you like to add anything?
Madam Chair, thank you. No, in my experience, I have also done this both ways, either leaving the public hearing open or having the board close the public hearing and working cooperatively with the board in order to develop conditions.
I presume that that's true for Tom. So at least we agree on one thing. That's a good start. All right. So where we are right now is we still have some items that board members have noted. Some have indicated an interest in having a response prior to wanting more information. I'll just leave it at that, more information. With that said, I'd like to get a feeling of the board members of where you think we are and what would you like to do. Our options are continue the hearing, collect more information, plan a time for the next meeting to review that material, at which time we continue the hearing, or we close the hearing and we begin deliberations. Or we close the hearing now and we begin the process of deliberation. So there's outstanding information that sort of sits first, and then there's what I think are two broad options. Tom Callahan?
Well, I actually hadn't considered what Paris suggested, and given that the various ones of us have asked for some information, we're going to get some of it, we might not get others of it. I think we should just keep the hearing open, and put the deliberations within the context of an open hearing until we're finished up. I like that idea, especially in the Zoom context. George, to answer your question, the draft has 95 conditions right now and 3 or 4 pages of findings. So the one I thought you were going to push back on tonight, you didn't. So maybe we'll sail through them. But I think there is the chance, you know, for a lot of back and forth still, whether it's on Clark's architectural issues, on height issues, on ownership issues. So it might be better for flexibility that we keep the hearing open and just start deliberating next meeting.
Let me say, if we were to choose to do that, what are our legal options for exchanging information so that when we get to the point of the next meeting, we are clear about what we wanted to know, what we found out, and then that what releases us to continue, close the hearing and deliberate. I mean, I think we want to, I would like to hear a bit of an assurance of how we can communicate so that, for example, Mr. McGoldrick, if you happen to do something with somebody that locks in one of the pieces of what we're talking about, it would be really useful if you convey that to Lauren Lynn so that we know, and that's off the checklist, right? I mean, we're in 2 rooms with no windows, and now we need to figure a way so that we can have communication so it doesn't have us go back again around and find yet other issues. So what is the mechanism for doing that kind of communication? Jen?
Hi, I'm sorry, Tom. So that was exactly, Madam Chair. Thank you for recognizing me. That's where we come in to help you all communicate. I apologize for the end of the last meeting, but it was a lot going on at that end meeting, and when Tom had offered to do the work, we kind of stepped back, but we should have had a plan too. So that's where we're going to come in now. I think per the open meeting law, Tom has talked about his draft this evening. I think it makes sense that we can work with Tom, get the information, Tom, we can work with council, we can work, Lauren and I, Eve, Karis, can all work together to do just that, go against the matrix, check off the boxes, see what's outstanding, and circulate, work with the conditions if Tom is willing to, do that since he has done all of the work. So we are that mechanism to legally go through and do the communication. And we can do that now that we have a clear directive. It was a little foggy at the end, and then the long break at the last meeting.
So that means that Mr. McGoldrick can give you a running list of the things that he said tonight that were in response to questions that were asked, so that goes somewhere within the matrix of responses to the outstanding items that were identified either by you or I have color codes myself. I'm sure everybody else has color coded documents.
Yes, Karis, does that work legally?
It does, yes.
Okay, that's so I think that we'll be able to make some great progress knowing that we have clear directives and we have the matrix, the minutes, and all of Tom's conditions, and a clear list of items that are outstanding for specific board members.
And that information will be able to go back and forth between the 2 parties without any issues.
Yes.
Okay, so then at the very least, almost immediately, what we need to do is to codify what it was that we asked that is not answered, that can be answered, and as quickly as possible. That means anybody that wants to see how high the building's going to be or what the footprint's going to be, show up at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning and there'll be a guide there, right? But we should, the point is that we're not trying to belabor this. We're here with you. We know we'd like to see it before the holiday season is over and 2021 arrives. But that means that we have to be working very quickly and very closely together.
And I will, like others, if you go through the list of outstanding items, we will all write them down and we can share those as well.
All right, so I'm going to take that under advisement and make the following suggestion. I'd like to hear one more time from the planning board members. If there is anything outstanding that you wish to convey to the applicant so that we can move forward and start to finish the matrix, convey the matrix, convey the start of the conditions, and be prepared for whatever the next meeting time is going to be that we're going to have. And I don't think we can do it in a week. I think it's going to have to be 2 weeks.
Wow.
But that's up to I'm available, but I don't know what everybody else's schedule is. But the idea would be that, but I'd like to hear from each of the planning board members, based on the conversation that you have heard, what do you feel at this point? Eric Potter. Looks like Eric has to type.
I'm not sure that Eric heard you, Madam Chair.
He just got bumped.
Oh, I see. Okay. Then we'll go to Clark Brewer.
Yeah, all the issues that I've brought up today, I don't anticipate there being anything new. So I'd like to know if the applicant's going to respond to everything that everybody's brought up in some way, so we can just decide if that's the status of what we receive as a part of the public hearing process. Then we know that it's just a line in the sand. Because I mean, the applicant makes a good point of trying to hit the major points. And I would say, generally speaking, we're talking about details right now. So there may be a sense of the law of diminishing returns at this point, but I still think that trying to follow through with everything that every board member has brought up that's reasonable is a good idea on the part of the applicant. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Eve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask Mr. Brewer if he's comfortable with putting the kinds of details that he brought up, which are very important, but putting them into some sort of a condition that doesn't leave it to just staff to oversee, but has to come back as a package to the planning board at a time in which those kinds of details have been designed. So I think that the applicant indicated that they haven't gone to that much detail quite yet because they wanted to make sure they had a project first. And
Sure.
I don't know if you want that before
Well,
or.
I think there's an element of risk. It's like if let's just say we approve this as it is, and the applicant made some major changes after what we've approved. Well, we would just have we'd have another public hearing. We'd decide whether it was a major or minor change, and then we'd talk about what the changes are. And unfortunately, there's some risk in kicking the can down the road.
So Clark, I'm not clear what you're saying. Are you saying that we need one more meeting to confirm all of the elements that we've discussed, or which we have in documents that we want to put together? At the next meeting, we would affirm what we see, and from there we would close the hearing and start deliberations.
Well, I'm not sure. I guess I'd like to know from the applicant, maybe not tonight, if what he's given us is everything that he plans to submit, then I'd just like to know that. If there's something that he thinks he can legitimately follow up on, which would be new information for the planning board, then I still think we could have another meeting on it in 2 weeks if he thinks he can get as much wrapped up in 2 weeks as possible. And then we could have another meeting in 2 weeks to start going through conditions for something to vote on.
Can everyone who's not speaking, please close your mic? There's a strange person talking on the. And there's been a lot of Zoom bombing in the last 2 days. Okay, Clark, so your position is that that to get a response back from the applicant as to the information that could be made available to us, and that it could be sufficient enough that we need to leave the meeting open and convene the meeting in a period in the next 2 weeks. And then at that point, make a determination of closing the meeting and starting deliberations. But you don't want to have it closed now. That's what I'm hearing you're saying.
No, unless the applicant says everything that you've got, that's all we're going to give you. Because, you know, even Tom's thing of, can you show us what the height is? That's additional information. So we wouldn't be able to close the hearing until that's available.
Right, that is correct. That is correct. Okay, Lauren raised her hand.
Thank you. Yes, just before we conclude this evening, I'd like to just note that I have received a comment from the fire department regarding they would like a hydrant between the two buildings at 124 Elm Street placed, and I can pass that along to John Cabanero, so that can either be a condition of approval, or that's just something that needs to be noted for the record. And in addition, we received a statement from Glenn Pratt on behalf of the Cohasset Veterans Memorial Committee that had been requested to read into the record. May I read that now, Madam Chair?
You may, and you may also call on the public for comments now.
Thank you. I'll read the comment from the Cohasset Veterans Memorial Committee. I know we have 2 comments in the Q&A. If there are any other members in attendance that would like to participate, any attendees, please insert your name and address into the Q&A function now while I read this statement. Thank you. So again, this letter is dated November 17th from Glenn Pratt, Chairman of the Veterans Memorial Committee. Dear Ms. Glassmeyer, as you may know, the Veterans Memorial Committee has worked since 1969 to build, dedicate, and maintain memorials and places in town to remember the thousands of Cohasset men and women who have served, particularly the 22 who gave their lives during the 20th century. Veterans Park was first built in the early 1960s and developed over the years to the special and dramatic place of tribute it is today. The park has had an unappealing backdrop for nearly 50 years, and the proposed plan, which we are writing to you about today, has the potential to make the park more spectacular than it is today. We've had a plan to add a wall along the water to honor and list the names of nearly 300 men that served in the American Revolutionary War of 1812, which we think will tie the Veterans Park and the new open space together. Veterans Park is a living memorial in that we add names of new service members every year. This year, we are adding 7 names to the War on Terror plaques. Additionally, we are also planning to remember Cohasset's only Medal of Honor recipient, Levi Gaylord, at the park. Overall, we believe our memorial will be enhanced by the proposed new project. Thank you for considering the potential for Veterans Park with the proposed additions. Sincerely, Veterans Memorial Chair Glenn A. Pratt, Chairman. Now with that, I will read the comments that are in the record from Robert Jeffers of 18 Spring Street. The Affordable Housing Steering Committee agrees with the idea of putting units on a different site. We met and voted on that. And then again, from Robert Jeffers as a resident at 18 Spring Street, as a resident, seems like the planning board should find a way to ask their questions before next meeting and outline whatever conditions they want. Otherwise, new issues will be brought up each meeting and this will never end. And with that, I'm not seeing any other questions from the public.
Please thank the letter writer from the Veterans Association, and also thank Mr. Jeffers for his comments. All right, let's go back to business. So we have Eve.
Sorry, there's one more just popped up. I don't know if anyone else noticed it.
Thank you. I will read that aloud. That's Janet Fogarty, I believe at, she's at Elm Street. I'm forgetting her house address. I know she's at Elm Street. She's in a butter. I have been following this project for a while now. Although I appreciate the diligence of this board, I am perplexed what is taking so long to progress. It seems new questions have arisen that could have been addressed previously, such as height. My property is across the street. If anyone had an issue with height or other aspects of the project, it would be me. However, I believe this development will not only enhance and resuscitate the harbor area, but will bring new revenue in town. Thank you, Janet.
All right. Start again. Eric Potter.
I'm sorry, I cut out earlier. So I'm almost in favor. I'm in favor of closing the hearing. It's moving on to 2 conditions. In the last 2 meetings at the very least, I feel very confident between the planning board members and Tom's work and what I've heard from the developers that the major issues have really been addressed, tackled. I don't foresee anything coming up that's gonna stop this project or change minds here. And it seems like I've been assured that the issues can be addressed in the conditions. So my position would be to kind of start moving things along here, and start addressing the conditions. I understand, maybe you kick it out 1 more 2 weeks down the road, but at some point I do agree with the public comment. It's time to wrap things up and make some decisions and start getting some conditions in place.
So first, let's find out exactly when we can meet again.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, could I speak?
You can, and I just need to get a date for when we can meet so that as we continue, we can figure that out. Do you mind if I just get that date?
Oh, absolutely. I just thought that you might have not realized that I hadn't commented.
No, I haven't. It's everybody's still going. Lauren?
The next meeting date is December 2nd. We do have an A&R on the agenda for that night. It's relatively simple. It's a simple lot line change. I don't anticipate that taking much time. So if we did continue to that evening, it would be at 6:45 p.m. on December 2nd. The next meeting after December 2nd is December 16th.
Okay, because Thanksgiving's right there. All right, thank you for that. Mr. Colery?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, let me turn on my video so you can see. Sorry about that. Thank you. So I'm curious, can we, I guess, I don't know if Karis North would be the proper person to answer the questions, but can we approve tonight the project with these continuing open, dialogue that's going to come, that both sides could get their needs met? I don't think that anyone is trying to sabotage this project or anything like that. So the developer has come to us over and over again, and I'm looking out for everyone, the town, everybody. I mean, the developers are town residents as well, and the board, and I speak as a resident of the town as well as a board member. And can we approve with those? So do we have to keep the meeting? I mean, excuse me, can we approve and keep the meeting open so that we can continue this dialogue?
No.
Is that an option? Or if we have to close the meeting to then vote? Is that how it has to go?
You can't continue to
I'm sorry if.
Sorry.
Please.
Ms. North?
That's okay. No, I want you to have the floor. Yeah.
I apologize, Mr. Colery. Have you finished? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Good.
I have finished. I know it wasn't very well put together, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to ask. And that is, can we approve the project and then know that there's going to be conditions on both sides that will be, and the meeting can stay open? Or do we have to does it have to be close the meeting and then we vote?
So there are steps and process to go through. And if you close the meeting, you can't continue to take information. And if you don't want to vote, if you're still taking information and you're still drafting and preparing conditions, because you want to vote on the decision as conditioned. You don't want to take two votes.
Thank you for that. Paul, do you have more you'd like to say?
So, I'm sorry, are you asking Paul Grady or back to me?
Sorry, it's like
Okay.
I think I'm looking at you and you could never tell.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I guess, Karis, if you could just clarify for me, so that when we do close the meeting, vote, approve this project, but it's approved with order of conditions. Correct?
Yes, there are going to be conditions related that are a part of the approval of the project.
Right.
And so you'll vote on a decision that lays out an approval with conditions, if that's what the board so decides. That's what I'm hearing. So that's
Those
that's what the
conditions,
ultimate.
those
Yep.
conditions, sorry, those conditions are going to continue to evolve, correct? I mean, like, I
No,
don't think there's a chance that we can put all of the items
Have to.
as conditions. You have to?
yes, all the items have to be conditioned in, and some of them may be, things like prepare, submit a final plan or a final site plan or submit an as-built plan. Some conditions aren't going to be able to be implemented immediately. The conditions will obviously take place over a long period of time, and the board will come back. The board won't come back, but the applicant may provide updates. There may be other opportunities for intersection, but yes, all of the conditions have to be laid out in the decision.
That gets voted on.
That gets voted on, yes.
All right, I'm going to go to Tom Callahan.
I'm making this confusing. I thought we discussed earlier an idea that Karis put forward that we can keep the hearing open while we deliberate over conditions in case new information in response to those proposed conditions is submitted. And then we're just closing the meeting at the last moment and voting at the last moment.
That's correct.
I don't know why we're making this so damn complicated. I think we need more information, but we can deliberate, yes, traditionally you close the hearing and you deliberate in a separate process, but we don't have to do it that way.
Right.
All right. And we can share with, we can start sharing information with the applicant.
Who muted me?
Am I muted or are you muted?
Somebody's muting me against my will.
Okay, so my understanding is that we can leave the meeting open. We can give information to the applicant. The applicant can generate information. We then get back together. In the meantime, we are both working on our sense of conditions.
Yes.
We get back together and we review those conditions. And then we review the condition. No, we don't review the conditions. We basically have received our information. We're satisfied with it. We go to a meeting, we close the hearing, and then we start to deliberate.
No, we can do, no, I can't.
No, we're not gonna, no, we're jumping over that step.
Jumping over which step?
Well, we're not gonna deliberate. I think what Tom is saying, we keep the meeting open and work through the conditions, and then when we close the meeting, we just vote and it's all done.
Correct.
Is
Yeah,
that-
yeah, that's,
We are deliberating in an open
I
meeting.
didn't say it as tidily as that. Thank you very much, but that's what I understand.
Thank you, Eric.
Paul Grady?
No, I'm for keeping the meeting open, so then we'll move on to the next step. I concur with Eric right now.
All right, is there anyone at this meeting that would like to speak? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a motion to be made regarding what we've just proposed we're going to do as a first step, and then we will close this meeting.
I mean, adjourn. You don't mean close the meeting.
Sorry, yes, correct, I mean adjourn. Tom Callahan,
I'll make a motion that we conclude tonight. We continue the hearing until December 2nd at 7 o'clock. Is that going to work, Lauren?
I think it's 6:45.
6:45. And that at that meeting on the 2nd, the applicant is going to submit additional information based on what we've heard from various board members. Fine. And we will also begin to deliberate on the 2nd. And anybody who has draft conditions that wants to circulate them can circulate them before that meeting. That's my motion.
I have a hand here. Is that for a second, or would you like to make a comment?
Me?
Yeah,
No comment. I just didn't get an answer. Are we gonna see a 3D rendering of the new plans, or is that on hold? I didn't get, if I missed it, I apologize. Just an answer. I'd like to see that at the next meeting if that was decided upon.
I think that's up to George.
I think it is.
I believe we showed the last meeting, but we can bring it up again right now if you like.
actually, you need, I
In the
think,
middle of a motion, though.
I think what we're talking about is something that's animatable, not a set of drawings.
It was a follow-up to your request, Amy. So I didn't get a concise answer. So sorry to interrupt your motion.
So if your diagrams are in AutoCAD, somebody can turn them into an operational 3D.
You're talking about an animation, Amy.
Correct.
Animations, those are very expensive to do, but they're really useful. You know, the in-between step is the 3D view. That's a static view. But I think the development team, the applicant team needs to decide what they want to provide and the reasons why they might not and on their own. So I'll second that motion of Tom's.
May I suggest a friendly amendment to that motion? Circulate is very broad. I think circulate to staff, not among the planning board members. And staff will work on it, and then it'll go to the planning board members in preparation for the meeting.
Why? Why can't?
Because otherwise it's because there's an open meeting law issue. You can't just circulate draft conditions around.
Could I?
It also is going to be the case that it's the only way we're going to keep it straight is if it goes to only two people who keep control over the information. I feel like it could get out of hand, and then we won't know what's the last version, etc.
Is it possible to get another legal opinion on that? We do have other town counsel.
I'm the counsel for this board.
So can I not distribute it to the applicant either? I mean, that's kind of the point of what we've been discussing, that everybody sees it so we can have a meaningful give and take on deliberations next on the 2nd.
I understand
I
that.
understand
I'm not.
Wait. So let me say how I think this could go, which is Tom gives it to Lauren and Jen. Lauren and Jen give it to George McGoldrick. These are Tom's ideas.
Okay.
He can that they can be conveyed from him to the applicant before we see them. Lauren?
I just want to address a couple of things. First, anything that gets sent in email from a planning board is public record. So anything, realistically, whether it's emailed to the applicant or not, if it's sent around, it's a public part of the public record. It could be obtained. I am happy to be the gatekeeper of information. That's the standard practice of things that we should do. If, Tom wants to send me the comments, I will distribute to everybody. Everybody can send me comments back. It's just the cleanest way to do it. It's open meeting law. I know it's frustrating, but that's what we have to abide by. And then in terms of, Paul Grady asked about counsel. Karis North is our special counsel. It's designated to the planning board. That's who we need to use. If anybody has a question about that, they can go to the town manager. I don't have any say in what happens here, but as far as the chain of command, Karis North is our planning board special counsel We are not to seek outside counsel other than that. And again, that can go straight to the town manager if someone has a problem
We
with
can
that.
bring that to the town manager, Lauren.
I'm sorry?
We can bring that to the town manager.
Yes, you're more than welcome to contact him at any point.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Eve?
I don't care how we do it. I just want to make the next meeting meaningful, that's all. So that everybody has seen things ahead of time. That's all. I appreciate, I know what the open meeting law requires. That's why it hasn't been distributed thus far, so.
All right, thank you. Eve?
Yeah, I have a question that might make this easier. I guess it's for Karis for the legalese a bit. But Tom can forward his draft to Lauren, and everyone else can forward their own potential conditions to Lauren, and Lauren can compile them and send them all to George and then back to all of the other board members before the next meeting. Correct?
Correct.
Yep.
So that before the next meeting, everyone will have a copy of all of the conditions and comments and inclusions for the decision that originally Tom put together, but people might have their own. And then staff will just compile them, not make any changes to them, but compile them for the board to review and for the applicant to see. That's correct?
Correct. And just a refinement of that point, which is if board members have questions or issues, they should direct them through Lauren. There should not be direct planning board to planning board member conversation on draft conditions.
That's understood, yeah. I guess.
All right, so now let's go back. We have a motion. Clark seconded the motion. Can I get, I'm going to do a roll call of the planning board members. Tom Callahan,
Aye.
Clark Brewer,
Aye.
Paul Grady,
Aye.
Eric Potter,
Aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye. Paul Caleri, as a courtesy,
O'Leary, aye.
all right. Everybody's clear. Mr. McGoldrick?
Madam Chair, just so we're clear, I understand what's happening with the potential draft conditions and such. From our end, I believe what you're looking for is we're going to take and list all of the questions and issues that were raised tonight, as well as any that may not have been answered in the past. And we will either answer them, show you information, bring a Star Wars 3D model into the next meeting, and or ask that if we can't answer them or we don't have the information or if it's too premature, they'd be part of the conditions. So we'll kind of have an answer list and a condition list.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Correct.
Great, okay, thank you.
Jen?
I just was asking before we adjourn, if you wouldn't mind, Madam Chair, asking the board to approve the July 8th minutes that were attached to the synopsis. Just you'll be getting a bunch of meeting minutes in the next few weeks. We're just making sure they have all the correct contact, but those are done and were distributed to the board.
May I ask somebody to make a motion to accept the minutes for, could you?
July 8th, 2020.
Paul Grady makes a motion to accept.
Second? Tom Callahan? Clark Brewer?
Aye.
Paul Grady?
Aye.
Eric Potter? Paul Caleri as a courtesy.
Paul Caleri, aye.
All right, thank you. May I get someone now to make a motion to close the meeting?
You mean adjourn?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn.
Motion made.
Did you say you made it?
Paul Grady makes a motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. A second, please.
Okay.
All in favor, Clark Brewer,
Aye.
Tom Callahan,
Aye.
Eric Potter, Paul Grady,
Aye.
Paul Caleri as a courtesy.
Paul Caleri, aye.
Thank you all very much.